sort of a broad overview of what I'm hoping to do here. I'm going to focus quite a bit on search engine optimization, to a large extent search engine optimization with Google, but also I want to talk a little bit about Bing, which is Microsoft's search engine, and a little bit how that sort of plays in with Facebook, which I think is actually becoming a larger player in terms of what you need to focus on from an optimization standpoint to get clients. After I do that, I'm going to run through some of the basics of what you need to do in terms of websites and blogs, also give you some free alternatives. So if you don't have a website or blog, there's a number of places you can actually get free ones if you'd like to. And then go into directories and talk about how directories and websites and blogs, to a certain extent, also tie in with other types of local searches, in particular with Google Places, which used to be Google Local or Google Maps. Because that, again, Google Local or Google Places is becoming a bigger thing right now, especially if people are using mobile devices like iPhones and Android phones quite a bit more. So I'll try to put it all together, and if you have questions, feel free to send them in, and I'll try to get to some here at the end. Let me keep it. First, let me give a sort of quick run through of some of the different things we're looking at. Websites are websites. I think a lot of people know what they are. You basically have your core information there about your firm, more or less marketing info. Blogs, in a way, for those who don't know what blogs are just like websites as far as like Google and Bing. They're treated as websites the way they're indexed. But they're more or less websites where you're actually doing or adding new pages or new posts sort of in a timely manner. So that the latest thing that you enter onto, the latest page that you add onto the blog website actually shows up on the top of the home page. Most of these are used for pushing out current information, but also for just discussing other things in terms of the practice of law. They do very well in the search engines because they're very easy to get linked up, and there's a lot of people that like to read blogs, and they're easy to sort of distribute out. Then we have lawyer directories, and we have Nolo, here's Avos directory, and Justia. Directories themselves, there's quite a few out there. There's also, obviously lawyers.com, Martindale, and FindLaw. Those, to a certain extent, are replacing the yellow pages. So you find them online. There are quite a few places. One of the key things with the directories themselves is that different ones show up for different searches. So you want to sort of do Google searches to see which ones show up and how well they're doing. But all the directories will sort of place some value and sort of help you with Google Places. So when Google's going through and trying to rank up their local listings in the Google search results, which I'll show in just a bit, all these directories actually can help you there because it ties your address to your profile. And then there are a few of the other sort of social networks, LinkedIn and Facebook. Those are probably the two sort of main social networks in terms of having profiles. A lot of times, if you do name searches, you'll see these pages showing up. And LinkedIn, to a certain extent, is become sort of one of the sort of major professional communities. And Facebook, of course, is very dominant on the consumer area, but also it's something which even lawyers and non-lawyers use a lot. So I would say that the overall usage of Facebook is much higher than LinkedIn. LinkedIn a little bit more on the business-to-business side, maybe more for corporate counsel types. And then, of course, all this sort of ties into Google. And as you can see here, let me put up my thing, 1 second. Sorry, let me get this. And let's see if it does it. As you can see here, you're starting to see right now Google Local actually being tied into the organic search results. And that's a relatively new change. For a while they had sort of the Google Maps up at the top, but now it's really closely tied in. I will touch a bit on how organic results and Google Local tie in together, but beyond that, the directory is also tied into Google Local. All right, so first just sort of a broader overview of the search engines. Over 90% of Americans have used search engines. 66% of the internet users say they use search engines at least a couple times a week. And 90% of the people say that they find what they're looking for on search engines. And of course, Google's the main one here, and this is from September 2010. Bing is taking over Yahoo. So how well you're doing in Bing is actually going to start influencing how well you're doing in Yahoo in terms of the organic search. Probably just as important, Bing has a relationship with Facebook. And while Facebook hasn't really focused on search itself that much so far, there's a lot of content on Facebook that is not indexable by Google. And I know the folks at Google think about that a lot, and the people at Bing or Microsoft think about that a lot from a different perspective. So I would pay attention a little bit to how things are going with Bing in the next upcoming months, in particular how it relates to Facebook content. And I'll touch a little bit about what you should do on Facebook as we sort of go through these discussions. Then, if you sort of look through, the search results, this is like this is just a normal Google page. This is what people tend to see. So their eyes tend to focus to the upper left-hand part of the page, a little bit on the right-hand side. And what you want to do, if possible, is try to obviously move your organic listings up towards the top. And again, this is sort of the page results, just so you can see where people are looking at. Getting up into those core organic results, are very helpful. Of course, you can always buy a Google cost per click ads. Okay, so that's sort of a real broad overview of search engines, and one of the reasons they're important to folks in terms of what people are using, which definitely Google and Bing are the main two. The next part I would say is probably the most important part of this talk. If there's nothing else you get from this chat here, this part about getting good text is the most important. Everything else, you can do, you can pick up, but you really need to pay attention to this. And I've talked to many lawyers, as well as other folks doing search engine optimization, and they don't always pay attention to what they need to, which is on the text side. So, when Google's coming in and indexing you, or Bing's coming in and indexing you, they're looking at the content on your page. And if you want to do well for particular terms, I think it's obvious you need to have those words on your page. So, and that sort of makes sense. You go, okay, I want to do well for, Detroit criminal lawyer, I better have the word Detroit and criminal and lawyer on my page somewhere. One of the things that you're going to want to spend some time on is really studying what terms people are searching on and what terms are relevant to your practice. And I sort of divide these things up into 3 different groups. The first one is sort of the locality. Is your practice focused on a particular state or the particular metro areas? Are there certain cities that you care about more than other cities? Counties. If you're doing criminal law or certain types of probate, counties actually get searched on quite a bit. And then sometimes you want to pick up smaller cities as well. Any particular page is hard to do well for everything, but one of the nice things about the web and about writing is that if you want to do well for a particular term or for a particular subject, you can always go ahead and write an additional page of content. So don't feel like you got to get everything down, all these different key terms onto 10 pages. Nothing keeps you from writing more and more content with each individual page focused on the particular terms that you care about. In addition to the localities, you want to take a look at some of the different practice terms, not just terms like personal injury, but you would probably want to look at things like car accident, boat accident, truck accident. If you're doing medical malpractice, certainly medical malpractice would be one term, but birth injury. Birth injury, you'll probably also want to pick up things like cerebral palsy or Erb's palsy. You really need to sort of take your practice and break it down in terms of all the different little subtypes of cases that you'd like to get, and then write some content on those different areas. So it's something, it takes a little bit of time, but if you do it, it's extremely worthwhile, and it really produces dividends. And then there are the profession words. Lawyer, attorney, attorneys, lawyers, law firm. Again, those tend to be words that people search on when they're looking for a lawyer. And while it's great to do well, let's say, for the word car accident, it's really good to do well for the word car accident when they also add the word lawyer in there, because they type, car accident lawyer, or they type in Ann Arbor car accident lawyer, because that's a very specific search of someone who's now looking for an attorney or looking for a lawyer. So doing well for the key profession words really lead to people that land on your pages or land on your site and blog, they're actually interested in hiring an attorney.